I'm Amber Eliason, a volunteer for the Northeast Wyoming Industry Partnership. This is a new strategy for public-private partnerships in Wyoming. I am the co-lead for the Community Education Task Force. We focus on the need to educate our current and future customers on the importance and benefits of our industry's products and services. We hope you enjoyed the education video we have created to cover a variety of areas in our finance and insurance sectors. Hi, today's video we are going to talk about starting your own business. So we're going to do a quick introduction. I'm Amber with Tracy Norris Agency, Farmers Insurance.
I'm Katrin with Pinnacle Bank.
I'm Susan Jerke. I'm with the Wyoming SBDC Network, which is the Wyoming Small Business Development Center.
My name's Ryan McGrath. I'm an attorney with Horning & McGrath.
And I'm Tom Jasiak. I'm a CPA with Casey Peterson.
Hey.
Susan, you're a wonderful person to send people to. What do you do when potential business owners show up at your office?
Small Business Development Center, we're kind of the first portal for a business to start. So if you have an idea or already are in the works, come visit with us. It's kind of an interesting thing when somebody starts a business because they're excited. They're really excited. They have a new idea. They may have some new partners that they want to join with. But yet it's also kind of a frightening thing because people aren't really sure where they should begin.
They're unsure. They've never done it before.
Right, they've never done it before. And for some reason there's this misconception out there that you should just know how to do it.
Right.
So we walk people through the steps of how do you start a business.
So when people come to you, do they typically have a business plan in place, or do you see them mainly with just an idea, or how does that usually go?
We see everything from just a concept to a full-blown business plan, but typically people just come with their ideas and then we start walking them through, okay, what is your business? Is it feasible? Is it something that's needed? So we can do some market research, we can help them put together some numbers, some cash flow to see whether it's going to actually work for them. So.
No, I'm scared to ask this question to Ryan, but how many times do people leave your office crying?
I don't think that's happened.
They leave the bank crying more often than they leave Susan's place.
Which we get a lot of referrals from Katrin at the bank and the insurance companies, and we send a lot of people to the CPAs and the attorneys' offices because we're kind of the middle person. Sometimes I feel like a road sign. We are, we're the first point of contact, but there's so many resources out there that we are really happy to point them in all the different directions to go
Sure.
get the help that they need.
And a great resource. It's expensive to start a business. There's a lot of upfront costs, and starting with Susan is invaluable to saving money and getting on the right track.
That's right. Could you maybe offer some questions that people ask you or that maybe they should ask you and what your answer would be to kind of help them succeed?
Well, and we'll cover this with a lot of the other folks on the panel, but how much money are you going to need? What's the structure, the legal structure that I should make my business? I have a partner. How do I bring this partner in? The marketing plan is huge. Putting together the business plan. How do you put it together to where you can get it out of your head and down on paper so that you can make that presentation either to a banker or to an investor?
And Susan, typically when people come to me as an attorney, the first thing that they ask is, should I have the corporation or should I have an LLC? And because usually they've got their business either started or they're ready to begin. They've got their idea, they've kind of got their plan in place. So then they're on to the, how should I actually structure my business legally? And I think that probably is the main question I get is corporation versus LLC. And I usually try to tell people that the LLC in Wyoming's actually the birthplace of the LLC. It's a super flexible entity that they can use. It doesn't have all of the corporate formalities you have to follow that you'd have with a corporation, and it really allows them to operate any way that they plan to operate, and then we can structure their legal plan around that. So I tell them usually let's go with the LLC, but I defer to, of course, Tom, because I don't want to do anything tax-wise that's going to get them in trouble.
I'm glad you chose LLC because I didn't want to get in an argument with the Ryan McGrath.
We're gonna edit that out.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. The LLC is a great structure. For tax purposes, it's very flexible. We can, it starts out as if it's a single member LLC, we don't have to file a separate tax return. There's no payroll requirements. We can make an S corporation election later on, and that's something we can discuss. It's good for tax planning.
And yeah, as long as it's okay with the CPA, then we'll form the LLC. And a lot of people want to know, does that give me the same protection for my assets as a corporation would? And the answer in Wyoming is absolutely yes, it does. As long as you comply with kind of the minimum requirements that are required of an LLC owner. You're treating it as a separate entity. You're keeping your personal separate from your business. You're going to have all those same liability protections that you would have as a corporation.
Ryan, can you describe some of the different requirements for LLC versus corporation? Are there annual meetings that are required for a corporation versus LLC?
So corporation, the main difference is what are called corporate formalities. You're going to have your annual meetings. You're going to need either written action by the shareholders and board of directors of a corporation, or you're going to have the minutes of those annual meetings, and you need to keep those because that's one of the requirements in Wyoming to maintain that liability protection is that you comply with those corporate formalities. So that's the biggest thing. And the great thing about the LLC is you don't have to do that. It's much more flexible. So if you're operating as a 1 or 2 person shop, you're not going to have to get together every December to have an annual meeting, take the minutes down, or do a written action that reflects that. You can essentially do away with that requirement. Now, there are some best practices with an LLC where if you're doing some major changes within the company, yeah, it's good to have a meeting, or you should do a written action to do that. But it's not a requirement as it is with a corporation.
Can you start out as an LLC, and if you grow to where you maybe now have lots of employees and investors, whatever, can you change?
You can convert. Wyoming does have a conversion process that you can go through. It's not that bad, but really the good thing about the LLC is you can have anywhere from 1 member to many, many members, where those persons would be your shareholders as a corporation. You can have tons of employees, so you can really scale up with an LLC as you could with a corporation.
That's great.
So
Yeah.
I have a question. If you have an umbrella company that's an LLC, can you have more than 1 business underneath of that, or should you set up a LLC for each one?
From the legal side, ideally for me would be that if you have, let's say, an umbrella company that's kind of the holding company, and you want to do separate businesses underneath that, that's kind of the ideal setup. So every separate and distinct business would have its own LLC. One example is, that those folks that own several different rental properties, let's say they've got an 8-plex, a 12-plex, and a 4-plex. It becomes a little bit cumbersome, but if I can set those each up as a separate LLC, it maintains liability protection between those, and you can still have that separate holding entity as the owner of each entity.
Good to know.
Well, and when you come to the bank, that's very important to know how your LLC and how your business is set up. You need to have, it would be nice to have most of the documents, or, go to Ryan and Tom before you come to a bank. You can always brainstorm with your commercial lender or with your personal banker to see if your ideas work as well. But it really is very important to know how your business is set up, who's liable for all the business, and also most of the time when you ask for a business loan, the commercial lenders will ask for personal guarantee, just because it's kind of to take the risk off the bank a little bit more with the personal guarantee. But yeah, make sure you have talked to Ryan and Tom about your business plan, and then also Susan, and then of course your commercial lender and the bank will help you and with the financing questions.
Katrin, what are some of the documents you'd need to set up a bank account or financing? What are the organizational documents, or what should a potential business owner bring to you to get going?
Well, it depends on what business you have going. If you have an LLC, we would need the EIN number to set up your LLC. That's for the checking account, the business checking account. There's various accounts out there, and our operations gals are very good about giving you the right direction. But the EIN number is very important. Then also the articles of organization. If there are minutes, just think about if a third person wants to know how that company is functioning, that's what we would need to know. Or we need to have documentation. We cannot just take your word for that. So a lot of people come in, what we see the most, they don't have an EIN number set up, and that's very easy to do. I don't know, do you guys guide them through that too, or do you just
I usually defer to Tom on the EIN number.
Yeah.
If Brian screws it up, he can fix it.
Yeah.
That's why I
But
do it.
typically the documents that we're going to prepare when we set up an LLC, we're going to have the articles of organization that we
Right.
file with the state, a consent to appointment of registered agent, that's the person that's going to report to the state, and also if, heaven forbid that company gets sued, that's the person that's going to receive process for that. But also then we'll have the operating agreement, which is kind of the internal rules or controls of the company. Even if it's a one-person entity, they should have that because it kind of tells the rest of the world, hey, this is an entity and it operates separate from me. And then we also want to have written authorization of the members that says, okay, these people are the members, they're allowed to go open bank accounts, they're allowed to contract for the company, they're allowed to go get insurance, they're allowed to go do all those things. So hopefully when they get those things, at that point they're ready to go, get their bank account set up, get their insurance ready to go.
Yep.
So Amber, what are the things that they need, to bring to you if they're going to
So
insure
we're
their
gonna
business?
ask, is it an LLC, is it a corporation? That's, kind of one of the first questions we ask. Because we need to know it's structured a little bit different. We need to know how to protect them, if there is a claim, if they have something like that. Other questions we ask, or that we get asked, I know I need general liability, but I don't know how much I need, so usually, 1 to 2 million is a really good place to start. But it kind of depends on how big, like, do you have lots of employees, is it just you? It's kind of where we start there, just to make sure that if there is a claim or if there is a loss, they do damage to somebody or hurt somebody, we have them covered.
Yeah, that's great. I think 1 million, 2 million is definitely a good recommendation on the coverage, especially with the kind of work that goes on around here.
Yeah, and most of the time it's, if they're working for one of the mines or something, that's actually something that's required, that they have to physically take proof that they have coverage for that to a certain amount.
Sure.
So if we have the LLC set up for liability protection, why do we need insurance? I know the answer.
Because you could get sued and you don't want to lose all of your stuff you've worked hard for.
Good point.
And could you come after them personally then still too with the LLC or no?
So one of the ways to what's called pierce an LLC and get to the members individually is if you undercapitalize that company. You have to undercapitalize it and do something else wrong. But undercapitalization can take a lot of different forms. And one way that I would argue, if I were in the case trying to pierce an LLC, is that they were undercapitalized because for the type of business they were engaged in, they didn't have the right kind of insurance. Right? So let's say they fund the company with $100 or $500 to start, and that's perfectly fine. But then they're going out and doing work where they could really injure somebody and they don't properly insure it, then I would argue that they're undercapitalized, and that's one reason that should be pierced. Whether or not that's a winner in the end, I don't know, but it's definitely something you want to have in place because you don't want all your assets on the line for your business either, just like you don't want your personal assets on the line.
Right.
Could you talk a bit about sole proprietorships, and we always hear is getting their DBA, but actually doing business as? Could somebody talk a bit about
Sure.
that and the liability that's involved with that?
So sole proprietorship or a DBA is just a person operating as a business, but it's themselves. So like if I have a lawsuit that we're going to file against a DBA, it's we name that person individually doing business as. And so it's the exact same thing as if it's just that person doing business. If it's Joe Smith's handyman service, I don't know where I was going with that. We're going to have to cut that out. But yeah.
But it's a
Yep.
lot more risky to be a
It's
sole
absolutely more risky to be a DBA than an entity, yes.
Okay.
It's inexpensive to set up an LLC as far as to maintain it. If there's under $250,000 of assets, on an annual report, it's $50 a year to maintain the annual report. So it's kind of a no-brainer to maintain the
really,
LLC.
Is there any situation when you would say that that would be better than an LLC?
A sole proprietorship,
Yeah.
you mean? I haven't run into very many. There's some situations where if you set up an entity and you employ yourself through that entity, and if you're going to elect to carry work comp on yourself, it may be cost prohibitive to do that in some industries, but I really haven't run into any situation where it's not advisable to set up a single member LLC instead of a sole proprietorship.
Lemonade stand LLC?
I would love to set one for you.
That's right. That's good.
We
Great
actually
day
see a
for
lot
it.
of DBA accounts, and we don't have, I mean, there are no requirements because you're
Sure.
just opening it personally. But mainly it's for the little handyman services. I don't know how Pampered Chef or those kind of businesses work. I think you could if you wanted to keep it kind of separate. But, you know, once you go into a full-blown business, we don't see those anymore.
For income tax reporting purposes, an LLC is a disregarded entity, so we see it very similarly. If you start selling anything, you have a sole proprietor. That's what you become, and then you can set up an LLC and have the same tax reporting requirements.
Sure.
Can you tax an LLC as a corporation?
You can tax an LLC as, yes, you can tax it as an S corporation or a C corporation. One of the things many people will hear is S corporation, S corporation. My barber, my taxidermist, my snorkeling instructor says I should be an S corporation. Why? What is an S corporation? It's a federal tax election that allows the owners to save on Medicare and Social Security tax. So you go to Ryan, you set the LLC up, then you come, get everything set up, come to Tom, and we start monitoring profitability. Once the business becomes profitable, we decide to make an S corp election to save on Medicare and Social Security tax. It's not something I like to jump into. It's hard to undo. There's loss limitations, and however, it's a very good tool, and it historically has been to save on Medicare and Social Security tax. So we pay the owner a wage, then the earnings in excess of the wage we pay the owners aren't subject to Medicare and Social Security tax. Yep.
Is there any kind of income threshold you look to do that with, or is it just if it looks like it's best for this person in this occupation or situation?
The measuring stick is kind of reasonable compensation. What would you have to pay somebody to do your job? So if they're earning significantly in excess of that reasonable compensation amount, then we decide to make an S corp election, which leads into payroll. Susan, I don't know about you, but I cannot stress enough getting payroll set up correctly. If you don't, it just causes a lot of time, money, and problems later on. So hire somebody. I'm sure your cat groomer does a good job with payroll. However, she only set it up once, and it's a minefield. So get it set up correctly, and then hire a professional to do it yourself.
Well, that's with about anything. I mean, I hear a lot of times, well, I can just go on the internet and do my own LLC, and, you know, I can print out a free document, and I can just file in, you know, put in the blanks, and then I already have my LLC set up or something like that. That usually leads to a lot more mistakes and headaches later on. And I think people need to know that we are here locally. We would love to just, you know, visit with them for and just, you know, talk to them about their ideas instead of them. Online is a good source to go to, but it can be very confusing. And then usually, I mean, we all went to school for that kind of field, and I feel like if just an online paper can do the same thing, there's usually something wrong with that.
Sure. There's not all the online resources are created equally, obviously, but there are some decent ones to set up an LLC and do stuff like that. But you want to take your time, make sure that you're looking at all the documents you need and doing it right through that online process. Obviously, I think it's the most simple thing to do would be to go to an attorney and get it set up. But I understand that, you know, some people maybe they already formed one online or whatever, but you need to get those other documents set up as well. So if you can find that online resource that can help you do that, you know, that's fine. But you want to make sure you have all the necessary documents in place.
Right. And then one thing I would like to, Tom is in the business, or you're in the business of saving the taxpayers money on taxes. Well, but I want to mention that it's very important if you have an existing business that you show some income, especially when people then come to see us in the loan world or in the banking world, and we don't see that they write off everything under the sun and make very little money. That's what we go off on. We cannot go off on all their write-offs. And I see, $400,000 gross income and then $40,000 they're reporting on taxable income.
Right.
Well, I have to go off the $40,000 taxable income, which is a big difference when it comes to their perspective on how much they make and how much they could afford. And then they come and see us and I'm like, sorry, you
And what
don't.
happens when that business owner wants to sell their business?
Right.
We don't have a profitable business. It's worth the world to them. However, on paper, it's not worth anything to anybody else. So
Right.
Yeah, we deal with those exit strategies all the time too.
it's the best. It's great, isn't it? You have to have an exit plan.
We like to ask them when they first start a business, what is your exit strategy? And that usually takes them aback.
Right.
It's like, oh, I haven't thought about
Right.
how I'm going to get out of this. I'm just getting into a business.
Yeah.
And getting into a business is kind of like a marriage, it's pretty easy to get into, but trying to get out of it can be rough if you have two people involved.
Well, and I always tell people
Can be
that
profitable.
if you are forming a partnership, that it is like you pick your partners in a business like you would a marriage partner.
Right, and
So
that's
it's
definitely
just
one of
as
the
serious.
most important things that we, get into with multiple owner companies is, if things go bad and things aren't going how you want them to, how are we going to get out of this, or how are we going to wrap up this business? And we can do that with a few different documents, but that's one of the most important plans that they need to have in place. Absolutely, is how do we get out if stuff goes wrong?
Yeah, we like them to be friends going in and coming out.
Right,
Coming out.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of want to take a second and talk about different insurance things that if you don't have it set up properly or if it's not written in your policy, it could be devastating to your business. So, some of the questions we get is, well, how do I insure my business properly? What if I don't own the building? What if I just rent it? And so those are questions that I'm going to ask you because it is very different. If you don't own the building, it's going to be a liability, where if you own the building, we now need to protect that building in case you have a loss. Other things, well, I drive a car, but maybe I don't have customers in my car, or maybe I'm not using it for product. Maybe it's just they more do computer stuff online or whatever. That's their business. You wouldn't need to change that over to your business policy. You could just leave that on your personal. Now sometimes, like let's just say instance like realtors, maybe some of them don't ever take their customers to house they're looking at. Maybe some of them do, or a contractor who is constantly going to get building materials. Those are very different. So if you're constantly using, or if the normal is to use your vehicle for business related stuff, then that's when you want to move it over. And that way, it helps protect you, it helps save money.
I
So
never
those are
thought
really
of that,
good.
having a customer in the car, I guess, for self-employed.
Yeah. And another question, so like my boss, his plan would protect me. So like if I'm out and about, if I'm taking a big deposit or whatever, if I hit somebody, his business liability is going to take care of whoever or whatever it is that I hit. So that's something that you can add onto your policy too if you have employees. If you don't have employees, you probably don't need that. You might also need to talk about, okay, I have employees, hiring and firing. You can get sued. That's something that you want to have in your policy. If you have employees, if that's something that you're looking at there, because that can be, if the right case, the right scenario, it could be very devastating to a business that you've worked really hard to build.
Amber, do you guys? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that brings up another thought about human resources is critical to a business as well. And starting off with a good personnel policy and accurate job descriptions. So
Yep, and
I
a
can
lot of
help you with
times
that.
we're going to ask questions kind of inside the policy, and we're not always asking because like we're being nosy, but a lot of those questions could potentially have discounts. And so the more you go in and the more you talk to people, like actually go in and talk to people, you're going to learn more stuff and why it is that they're asking, and you're going to be more covered all around.
Right.
Amber, do you guys offer any kind of cyber protection where, because a lot of businesses obviously are dependent upon the data that they have, so if they lose that data, is there any kind of coverage that's offered for them?
Yep, there is, and we also have for like if you're using your debit card and that gets stolen, and that's most of the time that's something that's built into your policy, any policy really, and you can always increase that or decrease it depending on your business. It's all kind of structured around what it is that you do. But yeah, because that's pretty important.
What about if something happens and I can't operate my business anymore? Is there any kind of insurance
Loss of
for that?
income. Yes, so with us, your typical policy, you're going to start getting paid after 72 hours. So for you and I, that's probably not a big deal. I can work from home if I needed to. Now a restaurant, that can be devastating. Like they might need something right away. If your cooler goes down, at what point is it going to be detrimental to you?
Right.
So again, that's built in with us at 72 hours. I would like to say most companies have that. But again, you'd want to talk to them. But yeah, if you need income before 72 hours or whatever it is that there's kind of steps in, that's something that you want to let them know so that they can make that policy for you.
Okay.
So we hope that you learned something from us today and our panel. We hope we were not too confusing to you, and we hope we are encouraging you to find the resources in town that you need if you want to start a business, if you want to take over a business. Know that you're not alone. There is some groundwork to do, but you have a lot of people in the community that would gladly help you to start a business.
And I think our email addresses are going to be at the end of the video, and I know that all of us would be happy to visit with anybody that has questions, so feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.